Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Turner, and I'm so happy to be with you here this afternoon in this special day as we celebrate LifeSavers. It is my honor to serve as the MC for this wonderful event. I want to thank LifeSavers for allowing me this opportunity to serve with you today. Well, we're in for a real treat. We have some special people here, and one, obviously, is Dr. Benjamin S. Carson, Sr. And right by his side, he has his beautiful wife, Mrs. Candy Carson, who's here with us. And Robin and I are so glad to see them again. Well, Dr. Carson, as you all know, is a world-renowned neurosurgeon, pediatric neurosurgeon, served at Johns Hopkins and was the head of pediatric neurosurgery there, was the youngest head of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins in their history, and we all know why. He's not only brilliant intellectually, but Dr. Carson is one of the most God-fearing, salt-of-the-earth men and people I have ever been around, and I thank God that he gifted him with those hands to be a blessing in our generation. And you know, often Dr. Carson is, to this day, considered a pioneer of neurosurgery. When Dr. Carson retired, we all remember when he ran for the Republican nomination for president of this country. And Dr. Carson, thank you so much, sir, for your sacrifice, you and Ms. Candy, and your service. He served as the 17th secretary, so it's Dr. Secretary Carson of HUD, of which I have the privilege of working with Dr. Carson for 2 years as we led the Opportunity Zone initiative for the president, and God blessed our work around the country. Dr. Carson was the chairman, and I was blessed to serve with him as the executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, going into the poverty-stricken areas of our country and helping to eradicate that and bring people out of poverty into prosperity. Dr. Carson also received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest medal for a civilian award in the United States in 2008. Dr. Carson and Candy have been married for 46 years. They have 3 wonderful children and 4 grandchildren. And Dr. Carson and I were in Charlotte, North Carolina, one day at an event for the president, and I was the MC for this event. And I had the privilege of riding in the motorcade with Dr. Carson. He let me ride in the front seat. And the Secret Service guy said, "This is the red Suburban that we're in. I'm gonna be parked right here when y'all get out." So we all heard that. When the event was over, I was outside in the parking lot talking to various people, making sure that everybody was okay like I do. And I saw the lights flicker on the president's limousine in the garage, and I knew then it was time to go. And so I was scurrying around, and I found the red Suburban, and I jumped in the car in the front seat, and I looked at the Secret Service guy. I said, "Did you see Dr. Carson?" And I heard from the back seat, "I am where I'm supposed to be." And Dr. Carson gently rebuked me and loved me at the same time. Well, Dr. Carson, I would say on this day that we all are where we are supposed to be. So please welcome Dr. Benjamin Carson to the stage.
Well, thank you all. It's so nice to be here. I always like being in Texas because people here tend to have common sense. And that's not always the case, as you know, in many places around our country. And thank you, Scott, for that wonderful introduction. Scott did an absolutely spectacular job as the executive director for the Opportunity Zone program, was all over the country, getting people enthusiastic about it. And, you know, if you don't remember what that program was, it was created as part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. And it provided all the governors an opportunity to designate the economically deprived areas in their country. They could, in their state, they could pick 25% of them. And if people invested unrealized capital gains in those areas, and they left that investment in for 5 years, they would get a 10% decrement in the amount of capital gains they owed on that money. 15% if they left it in for 7 years. And if they left it in for 10 years, they would have to pay no capital gains on the new money that was realized as a result of that investment. It was anticipated that it would attract $100 billion of private capital into these places that had been neglected in a 10-year period. In the first 2 years, it attracted $75 billion, 3/4 of that in only 2 years, projected to lift 1 million people out of poverty, increase or decrease poverty by 11%, increase the equity in the properties that people owned, and mostly it was poor people who lived in those areas. And in the beginning, they all said, this is just a boondoggle, a mechanism for rich people to get richer. Well, newsflash, rich people are going to get richer anyway, okay? They're going to invest their money in something. So if you can create an incentive for the invest it into the areas that are economically neglected, that's a win-win situation. And by the time the Council of Economic Advisors did their report on opportunity zones last August, a lot of that criticism had died away when it was seen how effective that program is. And it is my hope that at some point all administrations will recognize that we need to be doing things that raise the opportunities for everybody in our country, getting people out of poverty, getting people to be self-sufficient. That is so vitally important. Now, I will say at the outset here that I am not politically correct. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to parse words and trying to figure out if this is an acceptable thing to say. Because as far as I'm concerned, that impedes upon freedom of speech. And I think that a lot of people fought very hard for our freedom of speech, and we shouldn't voluntarily give it up to a bunch of people who want to control everything that we do. And also, when you think about what a tremendous nation we live in, you know, I've been able to visit 68 countries. We lived overseas. And I got to tell you, there is no place like the country that we live in. Candy and I thank God all the time that we were born in this country. And because of the opportunities that it affords, is our country perfect? No. Is any country that is occupied by human beings perfect? No. All nations have warts. They all have things that they're not proud of because people are imperfect. However, when you look at the opportunities that this has provided, the standard of living that it has provided, the stability in the world that it has provided, it is absolutely a magnificent place, and that's why it's so important for us to be willing to fight to save it. And it's a place of dreams. And my dream as a youngster was to be a doctor. Initially, I wanted to be a missionary doctor because I used to hear about the missionary doctors in church and Sabbath school, and these people would travel all over the world at great personal expense and sacrifice to bring healing to people, mental, physical, and spiritual healing to people. And dealing with people's health. What do you have, if you stop and think about it, that's more important than your health? You know, a lot of times we don't think about it until our health is gone. But would you rather be paraplegic or quadriplegic and have $1 billion, or have no dollars and be healthy? I don't think you'd have to think about that very long to come up with the right answer. And that's why I'm so happy with the progress that LifeSavers has made in terms of being able to provide health and health care for people who previously didn't have it. Particularly when you look at poor women giving birth to babies, the pre- and postnatal mortality and morbidity is 3 to 4 times higher than the general population in that population of people. And that's why it's so important that they be provided with the type of health care that it's possible for organizations like this to make available to people. And when you think about examples of how important healing is, you'll notice when you read the Bible that every time Jesus went someplace, what was the first thing he did? He healed the people, gave them physical health. And with that physical health, they were now ready to look at something that was even more important, which was their spiritual health. Now, my dreams of becoming a doctor were interrupted a number of times. The first time being when my parents got divorced. And I was 8 years old. My mother had less than a third grade education. And, we really didn't even have a place to live. And then one of her older sisters and brother-in-law in Boston took us in. Typical tenement, multifamily dwelling, boarded up windows and doors, sirens and gangs, rats and roaches, everything that you associate with that kind of lifestyle. Dire poverty and a lot of discouragement. People's always talking about how horrible things were and how you were never going to be able to make it. And I think those things had an impact on me. And I was a terrible student, probably the worst student you've ever seen. I think all my classmates were delighted that I was there because they never have to worry about getting the lowest mark on a test. But it was pretty important. But those kinds of things do impact children. It impacts their self-image. It has an impact, really, upon what happens to them in life. And I think sometimes about our children today. It doesn't matter whether they're poor, middle class, or wealthy. It doesn't matter what their race is. Look at some of the things that they are subjected to. Like, in many places, they have to wear masks, especially when they're like little kids and they're trying to socialize, and they're not being able to see the expressions on people's face and correlate that with the way people are saying things. What will be the negative impact of that over the course of time? And then they're told, you got to wear this mask or you're going to catch some deadly disease. And even if you don't, you're going to pass it to your grandmother who's going to die. And then your grandmother dies and you think it's your fault for the rest of your life. Think what kind of an impact that might have on one's personal development. And then, if they're white, they're told that you and your ancestors are horrible, horrible people. And you've caused all the problems that we have in our society. You're such evil people. And if you're black, you're a victim. And you can never really rise to your potential because of all the systemic evil in our system. Now, can you imagine being a little kid having to deal with all that? And then on top of all that, you're not really a girl. You're not really a boy. That's what the science tells you, but that's not what you really are. How in the world are they supposed to grow up and be normal people when you're doing all that to them? These are things that we have to think about. We have to talk about. We have to fight for our young people and for their future. Childhood is supposed to be a fun time, a development time, not a time when you lay guilt trips and all kinds of social mores on top of a developing young child. Something for us to keep in mind. Well, at any rate, there I was, this dummy, Everybody teased me. That was my nickname. They called me Dummy. And I didn't like it very much, but I tried to act like it didn't bother me. But it did bother my mother. And she was always saying, Benjamin, you're much too smart to be bringing home grades like this. I brought them home anyway, but she was always saying that. And she was always being very encouraging, no matter what I was doing. But she was a very observant person. And she worked as a domestic. She would get up at 5 in the morning and go from job to job to job, getting home at midnight. Many weeks we didn't see her except on the weekend because she didn't believe in being dependent on the system. She said, I will just work as hard as I have to work, not to be dependent on the system. But she observed in those homes that she was cleaning that the people didn't sit around watching TV all day. They spent a lot of time reading and studying. So she came home and imposed that on me and my brother. And we were not happy campers. I mean, in today's world, we would have called social services. They would have taken her away in handcuffs, but you know. But in those days, you had to do what your parents told you, and we had to read these books. But as I started reading the books, and I started reading about different people, I started reading about surgeons and explorers and scientists and entrepreneurs. And studying their lives made me realize that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It's not somebody else. It's not some circumstance. Can other people and circumstances make it more difficult? Yes. But can they stop you? Not really. When you come across an obstacle, you can either allow that to be your excuse for failure, or you can jump over it. And each hurdle makes you stronger and able to take care of the next one even better. You see, that I just described, that is America. That is what we used to teach our people. Now we have a bunch of people saying, no, you're a victim. Somebody's going to stop you from being successful. It's their fault. We have to get back to a point where we are not preaching that kind of garbage. That was one of the reasons that so many people saw America as their destination, because they knew that all you had to do was work hard. Remember the Vietnamese boat people when they came here? And you'd see them out in front of the 7-Eleven, sweeping the cement, very diligently keeping it clean. And then the next thing you know, they were pumping the gas. And the next thing you know, they were behind the cash register. The next thing you know, they owned the place. You know, people from other nations came to understand the value of hard work and diligence and how that was really the key to succeed in our society. We need to begin to preach that again. That is a part of health, mental health, and developing the right image of oneself. It's one of the reasons with the American Cornerstone Institute, my newest endeavor, we are trying to teach the children through something called the Little Patriots program, which is launching in full this summer, teaching them the right history of America. And we've engaged artists and writers to help create the right kind of interactive materials, because I remember how reading and getting involved with those materials completely changed my image of who I was and how it changed the trajectory of my life. And we need to do that for them as well. Teaching them stories like Bulletproof Washington. Some of you may know the story of George Washington in the Battle of Monongahela near the Pittsburgh area during the French and Indian War. He was working for General Braddock, the British general. At that time, Americans and the British were fighting the French and the Indians. And during that particular encounter, all the couriers and other officers were shot and killed, except for George Washington. He had 2 horses shot from beneath him. He had 4 bullet holes in his overcoat, bullet fragments in his hair, but no harm came to him. And he wrote about it in a letter to his family. But you know, years later, he was in the area. He hadn't become president yet, but he was quite well known. And one of the Indian chiefs, Chief Red Hawk, was very elderly and ill, but he said, "Please take me. I need to see this man." And he was brought in the presence of George Washington. And he said, "Sir, before I die, I had to meet you. Because you see, I'm an expert marksman, and I shot you many times. And my people shot you many times. And after a while, I told them just to stop wasting their bullets." And I wanted to see the man who was preserved by the Great Spirit above. It's a well-known story. But, you know, when George Washington was down to his last battalion during the Revolutionary War on Long Island, surrounded by land and sea, and it looked like it was the end of the Revolutionary War. And the meteorological records will tell you that a mysterious fog settled on the area. Stayed there not only that night, but well into the next day, allowing Washington and his troops to escape. Some people say, "Oh, it's just a coincidence." Is it a coincidence? George Washington was a man of faith. He prayed diligently. And it's no coincidence, I think, that a ragtag bunch of militiamen who were poorly equipped was able to defeat the most powerful military in the world. I think God has something to do with what's going on. And I think we do ourselves a big disservice when we move away from God and we begin to let secularism replace it. You know, it's interesting. Some of you probably remember Nikita Khrushchev. And you maybe remember when he said to Eisenhower, he said that your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we won't have to fire a shot. What do you think he was talking about? I think he knew a lot about what could happen. He knew all they had to do was gain control of the educational system so you could indoctrinate the kids, begin to tell them how evil their country was, and then gain control of the media so that you could spoon feed the people what you wanted them to hear and exclude the things that you did not want them to hear. And then replace God with dependence on government, and then raise the debt to astronomical levels so that you could justify massive taxation and redistribution of wealth and complete dependence on the government. Does any of that sound like familiar to anybody here? It's exactly what is going on. And that's why it's so vitally important not to be silent, not to sit in a corner and hope that nobody calls you a racist or some other name. You know, I've been called all kinds of things. Chelsea Handler, the left-wing comedian, said that I was a white supremacist. I mean, it's just, you know, you just can't worry about, quite frankly, the only one that I worry about is God. I want God to be happy with what I'm doing and with what I'm saying. It really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And against the backdrop of eternity, how long are we here anyway? And so it is very much worth standing up for what we believe in. And that's why American Cornerstone was invented, those cornerstones, those foundational pillars of strength for this nation, like faith, that's the number one cornerstone. Isn't that the thing that teaches us how to relate to our fellow man? Love your neighbor, not cancel your neighbor if they disagree with you. Moving in just the opposite directions. Another foundational cornerstone, liberty. Freedom is the thing that attracted so many people to our nation. And yet, now our freedom of speech and other freedoms are being impinged upon. Well, some people say it's not really an impingement if the government's not doing it. Yes, it is. If big tech and the media is making people frightened to express themselves with the compliance of the government, it's every bit as terrible and menacing as if the government did it itself. And we need to make sure that that is well understood. And then community, such an important cornerstone. The fact that we were able to work together. Tombstone, Dodge City, so many places that you don't even know of started as small communities. And why did they grow and thrive? Because people with different skill sets, different talents, were able to work together and make it thrive. If it was harvest time and a farmer fell and broke his leg, everybody else harvested his crops for him. Nobody asked him what his political persuasion was. That is the America that became the greatest nation that the world has ever seen. Community. We cannot allow that community to be destroyed by those who do everything they can to try to make us think that our neighbor, who's lived peacefully across the street from us for the last 20 years, is now our enemy because they have a different yard sign. We cannot fall for it. Jesus said it best, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And this nation is too strong to be destroyed by Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, but we can be destroyed by ourselves. And we're the only ones, we the people, are the only ones who can change that dynamic. And then the last cornerstone, life. We've gotten away from our love of life, from the womb to the tomb. We've allowed people to convince us that what's in a mother's womb is a meaningless bunch of cells. I was in South Africa a few years ago, and it was at a conference, and the head of the ACLU was bragging about how they are the voices for those who cannot speak for themselves. And so I stood up and I said, there was a woman, she was 33 weeks pregnant. She came to see me. She was on her way to Kansas to get an abortion because that was the only place where they would kill a baby that was 33 weeks gestation. And fortunately, I was able to convince her to keep that baby. The baby had a neurological problem. I was able to operate on the baby. It was successful. She loves that baby. She's so glad she didn't kill that baby. But I said, would you speak for that baby? Baby has no voice, no advocate. Perfectly viable at 33 weeks outside of the womb, happens to be in the safest place in the universe that a baby can be. And he hemmed and he hawed and he dodged and he ducked. He would not answer the question. Later on that evening, we were sitting together and I said, let me make it easy for you. I said, I operate sometimes on little babies that are 26, 27, 28 weeks gestation, premature babies, on maximum life support. Would you advocate for those babies? Oh, absolutely, no problem. I said, but the one who is several weeks more mature and is in the safest place they can possibly be in, you can't advocate for that one? And he says, I know it doesn't make any sense. But I believe that woman has a right to kill that baby until the second it is born. And I said, would you say that in public? He said, no. But you know what? Today they will say it in public. Now they will even say minutes after the baby's born, it can possibly be terminated. What has happened to us as a society? And the only people who can change that, obviously, is us. You know, we were at a banquet and a beautiful, statuesque young woman comes up to my wife. She says, are you Dr. Carson's wife? And she said, yes. And she said, your husband operated on me when I was still in my mother's womb. And there she was, completely self-sufficient, beautiful young woman. And that's why no one will ever convince me that what is in a mother's womb is a meaningless bunch of cells. It is a person. It is a person created by God, who God has known since conception. And it is our duty to preserve those individuals. One of the things that organizations like this can do, obviously, is make it clear to those mothers who find themselves in desperate situations that there are alternatives, that you don't have to kill that baby. And they can show them pictures of a developing baby. All you do is look at that baby at 10 weeks gestation. And you can see the cute little nose, and the little lips, and the eyes, and the fingers, and the toes, and the heart's beating. How can you not be drawn to that? And all you have to do is see an abortion on the screen. It's very hard to look at as they introduce that suction device. You can sometimes see the baby trying to move away from it before it is sucked in and destroyed. And of course, they don't want the mothers to see that, so they make sure that they can't see the screen. But they know what's happening, and what happens to them, what happens to their psyche, what happens to their self-image after that. These are the things that we need to be thinking about. But you know, the other thing we need to do in this country is we need to talk about the good stuff that happens here. The people who are always criticizing America, talking about how evil we are, they seem to never recognize that anything good goes here. The people who say that this country is systemically racist will never admit how much progress has been made. I mean, this country is completely different than it was when I was a kid growing up. And they don't acknowledge that we now have black CEOs of major Fortune 500 companies, black generals and black admirals. We've had a black president, we've got a black vice president, but no, we're systemically racist. We hate people, we don't let them get ahead. They can't admit that progress is being made. We're not perfect, but we've made a lot of progress and we're doing very well. And we need to talk about the things that are good that are happening here for the sake of our children. They need to be proud of this nation. And you know, Texas is a shining star, but it's being infiltrated. And that's why you need to talk to people. Don't just let them come here. You know, you can convince them. You can help them to understand that there is a much more logical approach for us to take. We need to start talking about being nice to people. You know, how did we get to a place where we're cruel to people, where we hate police, where we allow this kind of talk to go on in our midst? We need to appreciate each other and recognize that every person that you encounter was once a cute little baby. And maybe bad things happened to them, and that's why they became that way. But remember them as that cute little baby. And what can you do to make their day a little bit brighter, even if they're nasty to you? I'll tell you, it makes the biggest difference in the world. Over the course of time, people cannot continue to be mean if you don't treat them that way. It's virtually impossible. And if you know somebody like that, just try it. Try just for like 1 week being nice to them. It's like the worst thing you can do to them. That's why it says in Proverbs 25, heap coals of fire on their head by being nice to them. Give them water to drink, give them food to eat. God knows what he's talking about. He knows our hearts. He knows how they work and what impact that will have. Everyone in this room has a sphere of influence. There are people who look at you, who take their cues from you and what you do and what you say, particularly the young people in our lives. What a difference we can make to them. And then humility, as it says in Book of Proverbs, the 22nd chapter, the 4th verse. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Just learning where the power actually comes from. When I was a young neurosurgeon, had become chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Hopkins, I thought it was pretty hot stuff, I got to tell you. I said, look, came out of Detroit, went to Yale, and then the University of Michigan, and then Johns Hopkins, and here I am, chief of pediatric neurosurgery at this famous hospital at an age before most people have even finished their residency. I said, you're hot stuff. But then along came this young kid from Georgia. And he was a prodigy. At age 2, he was already saying Bible verses. But at age 4, he couldn't walk anymore. And he was having trouble breathing, and his eyes were looking in different directions, and they diagnosed him with a malignant brainstem tumor. And he saw all kinds of specialists, and everybody told him the same thing. There's nothing that can be done. Take him home and let him die in peace. And they ended up at Johns Hopkins. And when I saw that boy roll onto the ward on that stretcher, eyes looking in different directions, drooling, barely moving, barely breathing, I was thinking, what am I supposed to do? And I looked at the CAT scans, and there was this ugly brainstem tumor. And the parents said, Doctor, we were directed here by the Lord because we would find a pediatric neurosurgeon who could help our son. And I said, there's nothing, I'm sorry, but there's no one who can do anything to this malignant, inoperable brainstem tumor. And they said, but doctor, the Lord directed us here. And I said, I'll tell you what, MRIs were brand new at that time. I said, let's do an MRI. And maybe it'll show us something the CAT scan doesn't show us. We did the MRI, I had all the neuroradiologists look at it. They all came back and said the same thing, malignant, inoperable brainstem tumor. I told the family, and I said, I'm sorry. They said, but doctor, the Lord. And I said, look, you came all the way up here from Georgia. I'll tell you what, about 1 in 1,000 cases, the scans are wrong. And sometimes you can have like an inflammatory reaction, and it looks like a tumor. And I'll go in and I'll do a biopsy. And they say, oh, thank you, doctor, thank you. And I went in, and there was this big reddish gray mass. And I took a frozen section, and it came back high-grade glioma, a very malignant tumor. I took out as much as I dared. And then, closed them up, went out and talked to the parents, and I said, unfortunately, it looks like it is what we thought it was. And, we'll understand it better by and by. Only God knows why people are here for a short period of time. All those nice things that we tell people. And they said, thank you, doctor, but the Lord. And I, as I walked away fully expecting that boy to die, I said, I've never seen people with that kind of faith before. And over the next few days, instead of getting worse, he got better. His eyes started looking in the same direction. He started handling his secretions. I said, what's going on? I said, let's do another MRI. And we did. There was still a big, ugly tumor. But way off in the perimeter, there was a little bit of tissue. And I said, is it possible that this is outside of the brainstem? It has just compressed and displaced the brainstem? I said, maybe we should go back in. And they said, by all means. And when I went back in, that tumor had changed its character. And as I started under the microscope, peeling layer after layer away, when I got to the last layer, pulled it off, there was a glistening white brainstem, intact, distorted, smashed, and displaced, but intact. Long story short, that boy walked out of the hospital and is a minister today. But you know, but there was, one of the oncologists said, Ben, I've always been an atheist. I'm a believer now. But it wasn't for him, it was for me. Because you see, I thought I was doing all that stuff. And at that point, I realized that it wasn't me, it was God. And I said, Lord, from now on, you be the neurosurgeon, and I'll be the hands, the gifted hands. And that's when all kinds of amazing things started happening. One after another, constantly. Neurosurgeons were saying, who's your PR person? How do you get it? I said, God is my PR person. But what a wonderful thing it was to be able to intervene in people's lives and give them a second chance at life. And that's exactly what LifeSavers is doing. And God bless you for doing that. And all of us can take a part by not only supporting organizations like this, but by speaking up about the things that you believe, that you understand about this nation. This is not a time to shrink back and to be a coward. And when you sing the national anthem and you get to the end of that first verse, what does it say? It says, we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you.
Well, can I get an amen from anybody? Thank you, Dr. Carson, for your wisdom, and thank you for your heart for God and your heart for our country and for people. And he has a lot of stories like that about how God used him to help save the life of a child who many of them today have contacted him and are doing wonderful in their life. And so thank you, Dr. Carson and Mrs. Carson, for what you're doing. And you know, I was listening to Dr. Carson, and you know, in LifeSavers, you know, the goal obviously is to keep women from having abortions and to save the life of a child. But LifeSavers also understands that you have to take action and provide ways to provide for women and their children in their time of struggle, in their time of crisis. And so LifeSavers is an action movement to help women. Not just to say, don't do this, but help us to show you not only is there a better way, but we're going to provide for you to make that way for you and your child. And that's when Dr. Carson was talking. We have the responsibility to do that as people that God has blessed with resources, with time, with relationship, with spheres of influence. And that's why this room is packed today, not just so you can come get a free lunch. Yes, we love Dr. Carson and want to come see him, but his heart, my heart, and your heart is what can we do for those that are less fortunate than us and for the life of that child in that womb and the families for generation to generation. Is everybody with me? And so LifeSavers, thank you for what you're doing in that and providing critical health care, both with the mobile unit and also with your relationship with healthcare providers. Well, right now, I'm going to introduce a very powerful video to you that's going to show you three things. Number one, it's going to explain the three primary missions of LifeSavers. It'll explain how LifeSavers works in collaboration with other organizations to serve stronger. And also, we'll introduce you to Stacy's story, which captures how LifeSavers Foundation commitment to serving others plays out in one family's life. So please watch the video.
In the United States, there are 4.4 million children without health insurance, and millions more whose parents can't afford to pay the high co-payments and deductibles associated with most insurance plans. Often, this creates a struggle for parents. Do they provide healthy meals for their family or take their child to a health provider early in an illness when it's most effective for the child? Dallas and Tarrant counties have some of the highest poverty rates in the United States. The need is overwhelming, which is why I am so hopeful that we can impact this problem now and in the future. Hello, I'm Bill Denton, and I'm the CEO of LifeSavers Foundation. The purpose of this video is to share what LifeSavers has been doing for the past 2 decades. Also, we want to share how we work with other organizations like ours so that we can accomplish more and serve stronger. So what we know is that 1 + 1 must equal more than 2. And working with other organizations like LifeSavers, we can accomplish that. And then finally, we want to share a story about Stacy, an individual we encountered where we were able to work with other organizations to help break the anchors of poverty in one person's life. Our mobile medical clinic, the Doctor Spot, goes to where children are, into medically underserved communities, giving hundreds of thousands of dollars of free immunizations and performing hundreds of flu and strep tests each year. We also do hearing and vision screenings, health education, and sick and wellness visits. Through a collaborative agreement with the Pregnancy Resource Center of Rockwall, we provide a mobile sonogram unit that travels to underserved areas, providing free pregnancy tests and sonograms so women can see the first photo of their baby. Many of these women struggle with how one more life will impact their own life and the lives of their family. We meet these women where they are and provide them information, respect, and hope. In addition to free medical care, LifeSavers provides families with tens of thousands of diapers, thousands of car seats, and much more to families in need through sales generated in our resale store on Campbell Road in Richardson. I encourage you to visit the store and make donations or purchase items you may need. 2 years ago, we felt the need to do more in South Dallas. So we made a tour of South Dallas. One of the places we visited is the Inspired Vision Compassion Center in Pleasant Grove. Immediately, we began taking the Doctor Spot to the IVCC 1 day a week.
The Doctor Spot treats 18 and under, and they do it for free. If they need medicine, they got a pharmacy they'll send them to for free. They can get, vaccinations, they can get medical if there's sick care, well care. If they need x-rays, they take care of them and they get them where they need to be. But they're still bringing the mobile medical. They're here every Tuesday.
We have since established a temporary clinic inside the IVCC. And with the help of HKS Architectural Firm, we plan to open a permanent clinic later this year, and we will also serve women. By chance, at the same time, we got a call from, of all places, the Dallas International Street Church on 2nd Avenue in downtown Dallas.
Hello, I'm Karen Dudley, Senior Pastor and founder of the Dallas International Street Church. I met Stacy and Howard, I guess it's been about 3.5 years ago, and actually they stayed behind the church, and Stacy was pregnant, and I kept looking at her and saying, Stacy, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to the baby? And she has several things that she was thinking about because she already has 7 children. So anyway, immediately they provided her with everything that she needed in order to have that baby. We got her to the hospital and she came home, and it's really been an awesome thing to see how the doctor spot, stepped up. They provided shots, they provided vaccination, they provided everything that she actually needed.
I was homeless I stayed in the Opportunity Park for a year, and then I moved to the back of the church for a year. So I've been out for 2 years, and by the 2 years that I've been out, I was pregnant, doing drugs, and doing what I want to do, and not putting God first. We were gonna do, and we did it, and we never left and went back out there and did nothing, helping the homeless for one, because I've been homeless, and then I want to take care of the needy, the people that need, like I needed it. I want to help other women that got kids and that's out there struggling. I want to help them and show them that they can do it. They're not a failure. They can do it. If I can do it, they can do it.
Stacy's story continues. We're staying in contact with her because that's how real change gets made. And I'm going to ask you to please consider what you've seen today. And if it touches your heart, please donate so that we can continue to be the healing hands of Jesus all over North Texas. Thank you.
So wonderful. Thank you for that video. Well, we have another special treat. I'd like for Stacy and Howard and baby Howard to please stand and be recognized by the LifeSavers group today. It's one thing to see people on video, and we thank God for technology. Y'all can sit down, but it's another thing to see them in real life and see the work that LifeSavers is doing. This is one family out of many, 2 generations in the room with us. One of my pastor friends told me one time, you save a life, you save a generation. And Stacey and Howard, we look forward to the testimony of baby Howard and your family, because everybody in here has a story. Everybody has a testimony, and God is so faithful to provide groups like LifeSavers and generous people like this to give you a new chance at life. The word revitalization means to imbue with new life. You have new life, and I thank God that you do, and I know you're going to do something with it to be a blessing to somebody else, so God bless y'all. Amen. Well, Stacy and Howard and families like theirs, all of this work that we see that LifeSavers does, we know that it's only possible by generous donations. And today, as we gather, I would ask that you pray and seek God for discernment and wisdom and understanding on how you can give or continue to give to LifeSavers and this wonderful ministry so that we can be a blessing to families like this and those that we don't even know. A lot of us, we all have gifts, we all have talents, resources, but we may not be the ones with the hands and the feet in the street, but maybe you can give. Maybe you can give a generous donation. Maybe it's a small donation, maybe it's a big donation. All of us can pray. All of us can serve. All of us can give a little bit of time. And together, I believe that we don't have to reach outside of this room to be a blessing to future generations that may come with the work of Lifesavers. And so if you look to your tables, your table host will have a card for you. And table host, I ask that y'all pour that card out so everybody can see it. And on here, you have different levels of giving. It might be 100,000, it might be 50, it might be 20, it might be 100,000, you know, whatever you can do, right? You can give a yearly gift, a monthly gift, a one-time gift, and you'll see it there on your card. You can pay by credit card or check. And if you want somebody to contact you, we're so happy to do that as well. It's up to your comfort level, but I would ask that you strongly consider to give into Lifesavers so this wonderful work can continue to be a blessing to families like we've seen here today.